It's a Wednesday night and I'm sitting at a restaurant with a group of 5 complete strangers trying to decide whether to get up and leave or follow the plan. We're in the 300th awkward silence of the night, and so I decide, enough messing around, I'm just gonna say it. And so I open my mouth. So how did everyone find the food? Damn it, I chickened out, I didn't say it. But the next week, or maybe a few weeks later, I can't really remember, I was at the weekly dinner with strangers again, and one of the people was not a stranger, it was a person from that dinner. And so I was like, hey, how did you have a shift today? Like, how's your work going? And I mentioned like the specific workplace that I knew they worked at. Voice crack. It was a simple question, and yet they lit up. They started talking so passionately. The entire table just turned around and listened to them, and they spoke for quite some time. And then they asked me about stuff because we'd established a bit of rapport, I'd showed a bit of interest. And it was at that moment that I realized that conversation starters, learning, memorizing stuff is not the problem, because that question would have been perfect if I had prepared it beforehand. Preparation is not the problem, preparing the wrong thing is the problem. So here is a good sentence which you can learn, you can prepare, you can come into conversations ready to give a really, really good question. Yes, you should still try to become more confident. You should still try to change your mindset so that you're focused on making other people feel good. But at the same time, having this concrete stuff which you can do and apply and prepare right away is helpful, even if it's only 30%, whereas confidence is 70%. So what it is it was the one I used in this story. It was some kind of follow-up question on something that they've mentioned previously. Yes, I know, like if you've just met someone, you can't use this. You write down or you just really lock in your memory a couple things that they mentioned that they seemed passionate about, or just anything that they do in their life. And then when you see them again, you can ask about that thing. If you do that at all, it's going to lead to a very good conversation, and I'll explain why. It's so effective. But there's also a different way of doing it, the double follow-up, which can potentially make it better. That being said, you can't always do the double follow-up. It's not always practical. So just know that. Just know that a single one is fine. What is the double up? Well, let me ask you a question. What's better than $1 million? $2 million. If you can ask about something that they've said, that's good. If you can ask about 2 things that they've said in the past, that shows a deeper thought, a deeper level of engagement with what they've said, which shows more interest. Example, I have a friend who went on a trip overseas, and so I asked them, how was the trip? You can start with generic stuff like that. How was the trip? That's quite effective. But then after that, I asked another question. I asked, did you get a chance to use they spoke like a different language. And so I was like, did you get a chance to speak that language where you went? And they started talking about how actually, like, no, they didn't really, but they're still taking lessons, and they ended up talking about this language thing. And then we circled back to the trip. See, there, they had 2 topics to choose from. They've got all these options now for what they want to talk about. They don't have to talk about the trip. If they're sick of talking about the trip, they can talk about the other thing. And they can go, damn, that guy remembers that I'm learning this language, and they're obviously interested in the trip. That's 2 things in one question. And you're not kind of wasting anything, because if you just talk about the trip, you can then come back to the other thing later. It's not like you've now exhausted them just because you've asked 2 of them in one question. Another example of this could be like, have you been listening to that podcast you talked about, or reading that book you talked about? Ask it in one question. Again, you're just showing more interest, more engagement with the topic. They've got more choice for where they want to take the conversation. Sometimes you won't be able to think of this quickly. If you're preparing, you shouldn't spend too long preparing, and so often you're not going to think of these ones. But if you can, hey, it's going to be better, because it'll be $2 million instead of $1 million. In case that wasn't enough of a reason to do this already, and I will get to how to do this quite soon. I mean, you already know how to do it because I just gave examples, but conversations are like playing a frisbee. Interest is what leads to good conversations. If you don't show interest, if people are holding out the frisbee to you and you just ignore it, if you're asking about something else, they're going to get very annoyed at you, or at least they're subconsciously not going to want to talk to you as much. People always want to play frisbee, at least I do. People always want to talk about themselves, not in like a egotistical way or anything, not just talk about themselves to no one who's listening. If someone's genuinely interested in them, they want to talk to them. Let's take a quick break. Objection, objection. Preparation is weird. I won't remember to do this. If I told you you were going to meet the King of England tomorrow, the first thing you're going to start doing is thinking about what you're going to say. By the way, just a quick tip, if it was me, I'd ask, can I have some money? If you're mentally preparing when you're meeting the king, you're not doing any mental preparation when you're meeting random people and your friends. Why not just treat everyone like a king? It's not manipulative, it's not weird, it's just genuinely being interested in people. Some people just do this unconsciously. The only people who don't do this either do it unconsciously or don't do it and therefore have worse conversations. The charismatic people do it unconsciously. So just do it consciously, eventually it'll become unconscious. Furthermore, let's just say that you don't even use these because you're not following it like a script. If you don't actually use the sentence or the question that you've come up with, that's fine. Don't worry. Don't even sweat it. I don't use it half the time. It is still a good warm-up, even if you never use the question, because you're jogging your memory on all the stuff that they've said. That's another reason why this sentence in particular is good, because it gets you thinking about stuff they've already said. It also just gets you thinking of questions, because I'll get to this later when I go over how to do it. You're not spending 5 minutes, 10 minutes thinking of what to say. You're spending like 1 minute preparing. And so that way you're still, building the muscle of coming up with questions quickly. So you're practicing, you're warming up, so it's beneficial no matter how you slice it. And I won't remember. I've got strategies for this. I'll go to it later. The only reason you won't remember is if it's a bad question that's too unnatural, or you're trying to remember lots of questions, or it's just not that important to you to remember it. There's fixes for all of those, but this question in particular, it's pretty simple. So I think it's okay. All right, time for the actionable steps. Next time you're driving to, walking to, cycling to, UFOing to a social event, think of stuff. This literally takes no time because you're already going there. This should not be hard to do because you're not taking any time out of your day to do this. Think for 30 seconds about a question based on some things that they said last time. Don't think for ages. If you think for 10 minutes, that's called overthinking. It's called a problem. And so just think for roughly 30 seconds. Don't think for too long. You're training the wrong muscle if you think for too long. Get better at thinking of questions quickly because it'll help you in conversations. Imagine if someone asked it to you. See, it is hard to remember to do this stuff sometimes. You can do it like early in the conversation, that helps. You can write it on your hand, that helps. Just write like a single letter, don't write the whole question. Surprisingly though, you don't look at your hand very often, I found. Imagine if someone asked it to you though, what that is doing, you're visualizing if someone asked you that question, how good you're gonna feel. You're feeling the emotion. What that does, it hypes up the importance of doing this. Maybe you didn't care too much before, maybe you just wanted to try it. Now it's a little bit more important. Maybe you could even attach stakes to doing this. Maybe you have to do 50 push-ups if you don't say it. Up to you. Make it important somehow. And then just go and do it. If you don't get to say it, that's all good, no stress. Also, it doesn't matter if you don't do the exact format that I had on the board before of like, did you blah, 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 when you blah, blah, blah. That's not important really at all. That's just one format that would work. What I really just wanted to say is that it's some kind of follow-up on something they've said before. If you can combine two things, then do that for an even better thing, but just do one at the minimum. Good luck. Remember to actually do something. Don't just watch this video and do nothing. Have an amazing day. You got this.